thanks for joining us to this podcast, Ace the Information Age. Could you please tell us more about yourself, what you do, your background?
Yes. So basically, I'm a corporate transformation consultant. I like to call myself a Sherpa because I help people go through unknown territory. I accompany them through complexity, through areas where we don't actually know the answers. I don't know the answers either, but I know the terrain and I know the weather, and so I'll help them find the best route to navigate it. I have a past basically in manufacturing, and I've been working with people and organizations what I like to consider helping them reaching their full potential. The idea is that we're in a current situation, and we're all in our current situation, current lives, current work, etc. And we can navigate towards something where we are a better version of ourselves, or a better version of our organization. And that's what I do. I do that through a background in continuous improvement, in personal development. I'm also a therapist, and I like to work with people in changing the way we think so that we can change the way we act.
And the way you do that is with some workshops, some training, coaching.
Yes. So I will blend different things. So I can work on one-to-one basis, and I also facilitate workshops. I facilitate creativity. And sometimes it actually means that you just put your safety boots and safety glasses and go on the shop floor and sort of talk about what we see. So it's very much dependent on what the situation requires. And I work with individuals and groups as well.
And you have clients everywhere? I mean, presently you are in Australia. Is it your permanent base, or you in France most of the time?
I'm currently based in France, but basically I just travel wherever there's a need. And I'm being bilingual French-English, so I can work in sort of both languages.
Everywhere, yeah.
Well, I struggle with some other languages. Yeah.
So in your primary work, you mentioned that you're very good at unspoken information.
Yes.
I would be very curious to know if you can elaborate on that.
Well, what I'm good at is actually walking into a situation. For example, I walk into an organization, a factory floor, etc., and I'll start observing. So I'll watch the people working there. I'll watch how they relate. I'll ask them questions, and from that I'll be picking up basically what isn't said. What's going on. Are these people experiencing problems in their job? For example, I walked into a factory, and I was observing this lady whilst I was waiting. There was this glass window, and through the glass window I could see this lady, and her machine kept on stopping all the time. And she was getting really annoyed by the fact that she couldn't actually do her job because her machine was stopping all the time. So when the supervisor walked in, we had that conversation, and he sort of explained that they were having difficulty with this line, plenty of breakdowns, etc., etc. I walked into an organization not so long ago. It was a school, and I was a visitor, and I could observe the teachers, how they interacted. Oh, that's strange. The ones that are fully titled teachers didn't speak to the ones who just I'm not quite sure the vocabulary for teachers, but basically those who were full-time teachers were sort of part of one group, and those who were not full-time teachers were part of another group. And so it was interesting to see how they were promoting certain values in the school, and yet they weren't actually embodying them. So it's all these kind of things that you can pick up on. Nobody actually talks about them, but they're actually very good indicators of what the issues are, and the things that we could work on in order for that organization to reach its full potential.
And what would be the best, according to you, what is the best technique to to get this unspoken information? Is it really observation, or it requires some, a lot of experience to actually see this? How did you come up to develop this skill?
I think it requires a lot of observation. It requires a lot of curiosity. Obviously, if you walk into that place and sort of think, oh, I'll go on my phone and watch Facebook or whatever, then you're going to miss out. So you have to be, willing to observe, willing to understand, and also question, because what I'm observing may not be true. So I need to go and, confront that with what I'm thinking. Is that really there are two groups, or is there a reason for that? And so I'll ask a lot of questions. I'll have theories, but then I'll ask a lot of questions to verify that.
So unspoken information, but those are just clues, but then you need a conversation to confirm those clues.
Definitely.
Facts and reality.
Definitely. Yes, because otherwise it could be just our mind thinking all sorts of weird and wonderful things. There are the famous mind traps. So we
wrong assumptions.
Wrong assumptions. It could be me projecting on other people. It could be me talking from experience, but actually that's not what's happening. So you always need to go and verify your information, and I think that's valid for any type of information that we receive.
Yes. So talking about that, do you have any story where you actually had the wrong assumptions and you failed to confirm those? Your assumptions were wrong and you actually failed to confirm them or unconfirm them.
I think that is something that I've done a lot, and I think I'm probably not the only one. I've done it a lot, especially in my younger years. I'm tending to be a bit more careful, much more careful now, actually, because of that. I have been known to be a bit arrogant in some situations where I walk in and think, I know what the problem is. I know what's going on here. And in fact, it was completely wrong. It's just that I didn't have the right understanding of the situation. And I was taking a situation that I'd seen before and just simply applying it to what I could observe then. And I was completely wrong. So that's happened to me in factories. So it's happened to me in situations where actually when I asked the worker, his explanation was completely different. So in that case, it often says more about me and what I'm thinking than the actual situation. So I'm being very careful about that now. And I think it's, especially at the moment where information is very uncertain, coming from all sorts of different directions, we have a tendency to just use the information that kind of fits our worldview, or if we're a bit worried, or if we're a bit anxious, or etc. It's very easy to latch on to the thing that's confirming that, yeah, I know what this is, rather than staying in the unknown. So I tend now to try and make a very conscious effort to check my assumptions and, okay, whatever I pick up as information is just a clue. And sometimes I can do something with it, and sometimes I can't.
How do you manage the fact that you have to be productive? I mean, the society forces you to be productive, so it's very time consuming to check every piece of any clues that you may collect.
Yes.
And having this long process of observation and being productive. So how do you stay productive without lowering your quality of your work?
Yes. Well, when I work into a factory, for example, with a client, the unspoken rule is you've got about an hour. You've got about an hour to actually figure out what's going on before you can actually come back to the client and say, okay, I can, have a meaningful conversation. If I don't pick up enough information, enough clues, enough to go on during that hour, then generally I won't be relevant to these people. So you can't go on, accumulating knowledge. Just like you've got to go in there and do your best with whatever you can find at that moment. I'm also finding that over-checking information is also something that can be very counterproductive. So all this is just clues. It's just something we can base our assumptions on and work with it. So it's a balance between having not enough information and having too much, or trying to check too much, trying to be too certain. And there's an element of risk of that. And if I'm wrong, well, I'll just have to admit I'm wrong and please correct me.
And so basically, the ultimate goal when you work with those clients is really to make them observe, help them to see that they had access to information that they didn't see,
Yes.
to make the organization more efficient. So
yes.
all your clients are actual successful stories.
Well, the thing is, when you work in an organization, very often it becomes a routine and you don't see with fresh eyes. I'm lucky enough to be those fresh eyes. Now, the question then, of course, whether I wouldn't say all my clients are successful, because obviously it doesn't work that way. So the idea here is actually sort of, how can we see things differently? And we were talking about unspoken information. Most of the time, the unspoken information can't be outspoken. I can't just go out and point to people and say, oh, have you seen this isn't working? Because most of the time, the reason it's not spoken is because we've all tacitly agreed that we won't talk about it. So that's just clues for me.
So there's a question I have to ask. When you work with those organizations, I'm sure they ask you, they want a return on investment. So how do you make this outspoken and unspoken information tangible, in the sense, oh, thanks to us, you increase productivity by 20%, and it turns to 10% increase of sales, or productivity, or whatever. How do you manage this in your daily work?
Well, I work in the field of culture change. So most of the time, the input is we're not achieving something. So maybe we're not achieving performance, or we're not innovative enough, or sometimes we have conflicts, etc. So it's not always hard numbers. So sometimes it is, yes, we need more performance. Sometimes it is going to be, we have a conflict in this team, can you do something about it?
Okay, so it's binary: working, not working.
Yes.
Solve, not solve. All right.
Yeah. So, but very often people on a one-to-one basis will be very open to discuss the actual situation. It's more as a sort of group dynamic where we can't actually discuss what's going on. So my job is to actually bring that into the open and see gradually, but you have to do it gradually, so what are we prepared to talk about right now? And what can we only address in the future once we get to know each other better, once we've evolved, we trust each other, once we're feeling more comfortable, once we've learned tools to actually speak to each other, etc., etc. So it's a very gradual process. The return on investment very often is they see something changing very quickly. Something is changing. Oh, we're relating in a different way. Oh, that's good, because that would have never come out before. And sometimes it can be very tangible in a workshop where people say, well, we've never said these things to each other before. So they notice that something has changed in their way of relating. And it doesn't necessarily have to be hard figures. I have worked in continuous improvement for, probably 15 years. And most of the time, it's not a technical issue. The technical issue is there, but it's more surrounded by problems of people relating, of departments not talking to each other, of, let's say human issues much more than technical issues.
All right. Regarding information, so I understand that when you work on for a new client, so you go to a factory, if it's a factory, so you try to observe and you collect information. Do you happen to collect information from public sources outside the organization to confirm some clues that you may have collected, or it's always a conversation?
No, I do a lot of conversations, but I've also worked in technical fields. So in technical fields, there's a lot of information on the internet. For example, I mentioned to you preparation to this call. I had a real technical issue about we're making a product and the quality just wasn't there. So the quality had, the product had many defects, and it was a very complex technical solution that needed to be found. We were basically dealing with adhesives, and we had, I'd managed to find out that the process had something to do with viscosity. But actually in that field, there were no solutions that were ready-made. So the idea was to go into other fields, look at how other people had solved with other fluids, just try and understand if anything of that was applicable to our process, and then bring it back and adapt it to our process and see what technical solutions we could find, bearing in mind that it wasn't the same fluid and it wasn't the same conditions. But learning from other industries, other sources, and then bringing it back to your environment, your conditions, was actually for me the way that I managed to solve that issue. So it's what can I find somewhere else that I could bring back into my context and apply to my situation and learn from it. And I think that is actually the, that's what knowledge working is about. And I think that's how we actually use information. I think that's the good use of information, is trying to find things that you can relate to, but applying it to your environment, your context, your needs.
Absolutely. Thank you for that sharing. Question about the, so, you know, with this current situation, COVID-19, you've got a lot of people working from home. Do you have, in remote work is very different from, you know, working in a factory and everybody under the same roof. Did you have any client, you know, distributed team where you had to try to get this unspoken language and identify or solve some problems where some department didn't want to talk to each other, or it's not something you have seen so far?
Well, I think at the moment we're in a stage where that actually exists, but these people are now working from home or in different situations. So the situation was there before, and the question is, can we actually continue working on those situations whilst everybody's at home? My answer to that is yes, but I'm also finding that in these circumstances, people are less open to discussion. I mean, a lot of people are worrying, a lot of people are feeling anxious, a lot of people are wondering how they're going to work, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And strangely enough, it could be an opportunity to work on all these things. And yet at the moment, I'm finding that my clients and just people in general seem to be less open to exploring these opportunities. So it's a bit of a strange mix where we have more time in a sense, or more availability, and we have some possibilities, but then are we really sort of open to these moments of sharing? I don't know. But I think it is a great opportunity for us to learn to do things differently. And the online setting, virtual meetings can still be very rich and can still allow us to share and can still allow us to work on all these unspoken issues, because we can create a certain proximity even if we are geographically separated.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got some successful fully distributed companies where they never meet.
Yes.
And one of the advice that they give is to over communicate. And it's always written language, so you have to type what you're doing, what you think. And some people, especially the youngest generation, you know, they've been doing everything by texting, right? Dating, you know, Tinder. So they're more familiar and more comfortable actually texting that speaking over the phone or attending a meeting. So would you say that some of the people that don't want to solve those problems are actually older, or it's really cross generations Is there?
I don't think I could put a blanket rule out there, to be honest. I think that maybe this is my sort of, you know, upbringing in the digital world, but I sort of feel that the contact of seeing people on the screen provides different results than actually texting or writing or etc. So I have found that we can have some very meaningful meetings if we can see each other. And I'm finding that the writing and texting, etc., puts a bit of distance. So if we really want to solve issues and we really want to go deep and we want to improve our connection, my tendency would still be to do an online conversation where we can see each other, where we can see our faces. It's already difficult because we only have, I mean, we're all stamps, you know, you only have the top part of the head and maybe the shoulders. So the body language is kind of limited.
Especially if you're Italian, right?
Yeah,
you need the hands.
exactly. So the social cues are limited, but having the face and seeing the person, I think helps to create more connection. So that's my personal preference. I'm not sure I can give any general rules on that one.
All right, interesting to know. Probably you will have more clients working remotely in the next couple of months. So maybe if I ask you the questions again, you know, 6 months from now, we will have more elements to share.
Yes,
probably. All right. Thank you very much for sharing. I have last questions for you. Do you have any valuable tips on how to deal with information on a daily basis? So we know we have so much information coming from many sources. How do you personally manage this flow of information?
So the first thing is I try not to be a flow of information. So I will, I manage my time online. For example, for social networks, I know that I could probably spend the whole day just watching social networks. So I've actually physically limited myself. My phone sort of cuts me off after 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So I've put in place a sort of safety net for that. I tend to also separate the sources of information I have. Personally, I enjoy reading. I have a huge reading list of books, and I like to be able to read information from books. Because usually a book is something that's been written, it's been studied, so the knowledge in it is sound, and I can then use it, think about it while I'm reading and use it. Whereas if I'm watching a video or something that's documentary, then the information comes at me and I don't really have time to assimilate or see if it's useful or not. So I tend to privilege it that's written, because then I can think about it and use it. And I use videos just for short information when I just want to get, you know, maybe how can I do this? I'll just go online and, you know, watch a video for that. I also, I think on the social media, there are a lot of opinions. Now, opinions are great if you want to explore a topic, but I find that if I want to go deeper into a topic, I'll tend to go for more things like articles and books and things that are a bit more researched. The other thing I do in terms of information is I think that a great way to deal with information is sometimes to have no information at all. So I need periods of time when I'm sort of removed from that. And I'm finding that, especially as we're doing a lot of work online now, that I need to fix periods of time when I'm just away from receiving emails, receiving stimulus. And the other thing I'd say that for me is really important in information is having different sources. I will try and have trusted sources, places where I can go and I know that that information is going to be relevant. That it's going to be trusted. And then for the sources where I would need more fact checking or sources where you're not quite sure, then I'll tend to just have a sort of, oh, that's my sort of, oh, that's interesting file, and I'll just look into that to if I want new ideas or if I want just a little, something to get me thinking, etc. But I won't necessarily spend as much time on that. So I just try and find the information that's relevant for me, and then I've got a bunch of systems that I've put in place where I'll just follow certain people. Instead of following everybody, I'll just follow certain people or certain groups. So I know that that information is something that's interesting, that's relevant to me,
So
and
it's
that I
all
want to
about
receive.
filters.
It's all about filters, yes, and filters and personal discipline. I think I tend to be very divergent. So, you go on internet for something and you end up reading about penguins, and it's really fascinating, but it wasn't exactly the initial thing.
Yeah. Internet is very, very distracting indeed.
Yeah.
You mentioned you a book lover.
Yes.
Do you have any books to recommend regarding information and what we just discussed? Is there any book you would suggest us to read?
No, actually, not regarding information. No.
So what is your top 3 books that you read in the past that are really mind expanding? Is there any that you?
Yes. So I will go in the personal development field. And I'd say that one book that has a great impact on me was The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck, which is basically about our personal growth and helping others to grow. Then I would probably go to Gay Hendricks' Conscious Loving, which is all about relating with other people and co-commitment. And in number 3, I would probably pick Osho on creativity.
All right, I will check them out. Mark, a pleasure to discuss with you. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your work and some of the things that you've done, and for all the tips and for sharing.
Thank you, Aurelien, and speak to you soon then.